알리 아자디
So
선생님
if you don't
말고는
mind, I
지금 다
will
한국 분이기 때문에요.
preside this forum in
그러면은
Korean,
제가 한국어로
and then
본
I will
포럼을 진행하기로
inform
하겠습니다.
some English for your understanding.
그리고 몇 가지
지금부터
영어
글로벌
말씀을
배터리
드리겠습니다.
포럼을 시작하겠습니다.
So let us begin the global battery forum.
악천후로 어려운 환경
It is
속에서
quite
이렇게
raining
참가해
right
주셔서
now, but again,
감사합니다.
thank you very much for joining us on a rainy day.
그러면 저희가 오늘 전체적인 것은 오프닝 세리머니 하고
So after the opening
그리고
ceremony,
알리자디의
we will
키노트
hear
스피치
the keynote speech
그리고
from
이 유럽에서
Mr. Ali
유명한
Izzadi.
그
And
투자
from Europe,
특히 배터리 스타트업에 대해서
We will
유명한
hear from
제임스
battery
프리스
startup.
프린시펄께서 오늘
The
비디오로
famous,
이
James
투자 분야에
Frick
대해서 어떤
principal
가이드라인이 있는지를
have sent us a
설명해
video,
드릴 그런
and he will
예정입니다.
talk about some
그리고
guideline
끝으로
for venture
우리나라의
capitals.
대표적인
Last but
배터리
not least, we
업계의
will hear
큰
from
별
Korea's
방송용
famous
대표님과
battery
김부기
companies,
대표이사님의
CEO
그
Bang
성공적인
Scott and
케이스
CEO
스타디를
Kim Boo-gi.
여러분에게
We will hear from
설명드리도록
their
그렇게
successful
하겠습니다.
case
We'll
studies.
start the Global Battery Forum. The
네, 글로벌
opening
배터리 포럼을
remarks
시작을 할 텐데요.
will be delivered by the
개회사는
박종우, the former
박종우
chairman of the Samsung SDI and the co-chair
위원장님께서
of the
해주시겠습니다.
International
전에는 삼성
EV
SDI의 회장을 지내셨습니다.
회장님 부탁드리겠습니다.
국제 전기자동차 엑스포 공동주기 위원장님을 맞아주시기 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
Ladies and gentlemen,
네, 기분 여러분,
distinguished guests
안녕하십니까?
and the participants from all
그리고
around
전
the world.
세계에서 참여해 주시는
It is
참가자
with
여러분,
great
안녕하십니까?
pleasure that I welcome you to the
제가
Global
굉장히
Battery Forum.
영광스럽게도 여러분을 글로벌
As we
배터리
gather
포럼에
here
환영을 하게
today,
됐습니다.
We acknowledge the vital importance of batteries in powering the world around us. From electric vehicle to portable devices, from renewable energy storage to space exploration. Batteries have become an indispensable part of our lives. Throughout the course of this forum, we will hear from the distinguished speakers how to restructure the global SCM and the IRA policy in United States and build ecosystems to invest the startup companies around the world. In addition, we will also share insight of the most recent innovative battery technology. I am confident that the Global Battery Forum will serve as an invaluable platform for collaboration, knowledge sharing, and networking. I invite you to join us in this exciting journey and make the most of this unique opportunity to contribute to the advancement of battery technology and its impact on our society. Thank you for being part of this important dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And next speaker is the welcome remarks, and then Kim Jin-chul is the commissioner of the Gwangju Free Trade Economic Zone Authority. Please send warm applause.
Good morning. As introduced, I am Kim Jin-chul from Gwangju Free Economic Zone Authority. I used to work at a foreigners committee in Korea in the past. So since the beginning of this expo, I've been participating in this expo, contributing to many sectors. First of all, it's been 10 years since the expo started. Congratulations. Battery is a big issue today. It's very hot theme. And I'm very happy to join this global battery forum in this regard. And I'd like to say welcome to everyone for participating. And I'd like to say thank you to all the organizers. Today's forum consists of global guest keynote speeches, which are two. And we will also listen to famous SMEs and startups presentations. This shows that people have big interest in battery industry home and abroad. In line with that, my city, Gwangju, is working with KEPCO, the Korean electricity public company, to nurture energy industry. So I hope this forum will serve as a platform to nurture the ecosystem of batteries so that many battery companies can grow together through our discussions. And my city, Gwangju, will also work together to develop battery industry together. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Then Professor Lee Kye-myung, Head of the General Operation Center, Jeju Regional Innovation Platform of Jeju University, will deliver the congratulatory speech. Send a warm applause.
여러분 반갑습니다.
Very good morning. I am currently a professor of Jeju University, and very recently, I was elected to the center leader of the General Operations Center Jeju. We are now finishing our plan, and we call this the RIS, Regional Innovation System. Let me introduce RIS very briefly. So in the region, we do education and nurturing of the human resources and send them to the industry and make industry better, which will lead to job creation. So this is quite a virtuous cycle. So please send your interest to RIS in the future. Now let me begin the welcoming remarks. Jeju is a very special place. This is where the carbon-free policy started in Korea, and actually the introduction of EV has started in Jeju. Batteries also, when it comes to the dissemination of EV, then we have seen a lot of used batteries, and there's been a lot of works to utilize this used batteries in Jeju. And Jeju had the first in Korea used battery center. Now we are also using used batteries for many applications, and we are seeing good results. So when it comes to batteries, more than what you think, it is slower than you think. Because larger battery storing system or EV batteries and their application, we had a lot of issues from the beginning, risk of fire and other issues as well. And very recently, when it comes to protecting the batteries, we invented a lot of safety circuits and protection. Then batteries became much safer. Based on these, large-scale ESS and other applications were introduced, and this is where batteries are headed. In particular, in Jeju, maybe you are well aware of this, we are over-generating from renewable energies. We are wasting the over-generated renewable energies. So mostly in spring and autumn. So what we need here is how to storage these overgenerated energy. So storing these energy would give a better tool to this type of renewable energy generation, which can also handle this climate issue globally. So batteries are the most important factors for climate change. So today we are having this Global Battery Forum. I hope better ideas and better technologies can be introduced, and we also will be able to seek new collaborations. And through this, I really hope that we can handle this climate change issue, and batteries are the keys to solve this issue. And again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I hope you have good results from this forum. And I hope good prosperity for you and your business, and you have good time here. Thank you very much.
Professor Lee Jae-myung. And then for the record, and then we will have the group the photo. And would you please come out and then we'll take a photo together. 회장님 잠깐 나오셔서 같이 그룹 사진 하나 찍으시죠.
We will take group photo before we begin the keynote speech. Please come up to the stage.
Thank you very much. And then is the Ali Izadi, head of Asia Pacific, Bloomberg NEF, will deliver the keynote speech. Please send a warm applause.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I would like to begin by thanking the IAV Organizing Committee for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. It's my pleasure to share with you analysis my colleagues around the world do on energy transition. For my presentation, I'm going to focus on the current state of the global battery supply chain and how recent policies in the US and EU are trying to reshape the battery supply chain. When we look at the battery supply chain, we can look at 5 key areas. The first one, access to raw materials and processing of those raw materials. The second element, the battery cell and component manufacturing capacity. The third element is around the environmental and social and governance associated with the battery supply chain. So for example, the emission intensity associated with the electricity used for battery manufacturing. Fourth one is around the innovative capabilities of the market that's manufacturing batteries. So this is the access to the talent required for battery manufacturing. And finally, it's about the local demand. Every year, we analyze the top 30 countries involved in battery manufacturing across these 5 parameters. This shows you the ranking based on the data available as of the end of last year. You can see China overall ranks #1, and then Canada and US also are quite ranked highly. You can see Korea does pretty well. It's ranked 6. In fact, if you look at specific parameters, particularly around cell manufacturing, overall Korea ranks 2. Where the number goes a little bit lower is, of course, access to raw materials. In terms of raw materials, this is partly about geographic destiny. So some countries, such as China, have a fairly good access to a variety of the raw materials required for lithium-ion battery manufacturing. Others, such as Democratic Republic of Congo, are the biggest supplier of cobalt, but they don't have much around their other key materials. If you look at Japan and Korea, they're actually not on the chart here. The main reason being that neither Japan nor Korea, even though they're leading lithium-ion battery manufacturers, they don't have the raw materials required for lithium-ion battery manufacturing in their national boundaries. The other factor that's very critical is around how clean the electricity supply for lithium-ion battery manufacturing is. In this example, we're looking at manufacturing nickel manganese cobalt 611 chemistry starting in central China. You can see that the emission intensity associated with manufacturing the battery in central China is quite high because the average grid emission intensity in that country is pretty high. Now, if we shift the cell manufacturing to the Nordics while getting the cathode material processed in China, the emission intensity lowers a little bit, but still is pretty high, partly because the biggest component of emissions associated with lithium-ion battery manufacturing is around the manufacturing of the cathode. Finally, if you do all the processing in the Nordics, then you can see the number being a lot lower, partly because the Nordics have a very high share of clean electricity in their mix. What we're trying to highlight here is really it's important to also consider the emission intensity associated with the electricity supply. Now, in the China example, I'm using the average grid intensity. In fact, battery manufacturers in China, for example, LG Energy Solution, already make sure that they're procuring clean electricity, so their emission intensity is lower. In the case of the lithium-ion battery manufacturing plants that LG has in China, they buy renewable energy certificates to offset the emissions associated with their manufacturing there. So that provides one way of addressing the average high emission intensity of China's grid. This chart is probably no surprise to most of you. Today, China dominates both cell manufacturing as well as the key components that go to battery manufacturing, but also on the demand side, China is the biggest demand market for lithium-ion batteries, given that it has the largest market for EVs. Of course, the European market is also growing quite rapidly, and then for some key components, Japan and Korea still play a crucial role. What's even more surprising is that when we go more further upstream, not only China plays an important role in extraction, particularly for lithium and nickel, more importantly for processing of those raw materials. So for example, for cobalt, which China does not have any domestic cobalt supplies, for processing of cobalt to make the cathode electrode, China accounts for just over 60% of the current processing capacity in the world. Now the US and the EU want to change this significant dependence on supply chains in China. Today, China, along with Korea, has also already invested heavily in battery recycling capacity. So again, you can see that the share of Asia Pacific is much more dominant than Europe and the US currently. But the US and Europe are trying to change this. In the case of the US, as many of you have heard, the Inflation Reduction Act is trying to provide incentives to increase domestic manufacturing within North America, as well as support higher growth of the EV market in North America on the demand side. There are a lot of incentives in the IRA, so I won't be delving too much on those, but just to highlight the starting point of the incentives on the manufacturing side are relatively more relaxed. So initially, 40% of the critical minerals have to come from North America and countries that the US has free trade agreements with. But then by 2027, that share increases to 80%. For battery components, the starting point is 50%, and then by 2029, that number has to reach 100% with all the components being manufactured in North America. This has caused a lot of concern in many countries, including here in Korea, but also this is an opportunity, of course, for Korean manufacturers to expand their manufacturing capacity in North America, as they've already committed to doing so. Since the Inflation Reduction Act was announced, we've already seen almost $60 billion worth of new investment in battery manufacturing supply chains across North America. Majority of that is in the US itself, but you're seeing also key benefits here in Canada as well as Mexico, as those battery manufacturing capacity in those countries also qualify under certain circumstances. Of the $60 billion announcement so far, about half of it is for battery cell manufacturing. About a sixth of it is in EV manufacturing, and then you can see a smaller portion currently is being focused around the further upstream in the supply chain. Now, the EU is also trying to support more domestic manufacturing in the continent. In the case of the EU, the current target is to have 80% of domestic demand be met with manufacturing capacity internally within Europe. If we compare the EU target to the capacity already announced, then the target seems to be fairly easily achievable. However, since the US Inflation Reduction Act has been announced, there are some concerns that some of the originally planned investments in the EU are going to shift towards the US, primarily because the incentives in the US are much more attractive. Now, in the case of EU, under the Net Zero Industry Act, the European Union is also trying to increase domestic dependence on domestic manufacturer supply chains. For batteries specifically, they're looking at increasing the amount of manufacturing capacity within Europe by almost a factor of 4. As you saw in the earlier chart, this is potentially fairly feasible. The way the EU is trying to support this is through including local content requirements as part of the competitive auction programs the EU member states run. This could be potentially impactful. However, the EU is also conscious that this may increase costs. So even though they want to put in local content requirements, if procuring these local content would increase in cost by more than 10%, then there can be exceptions. So at the same time, the EU is trying to balance the rising costs of domestic manufacturing versus ensuring that the accelerated deployment of these technologies within Europe can be supported economically. The EU has also passed its Critical Raw Materials Act, and in the CRMA, it's targeting all the key elements, including rare earths that are required not only for battery manufacturing, but also for other key clean tech equipment such as solar as well as wind turbines. Now, in the CRMA, there is a target for extraction. Although the extraction targets are fairly weak, it's only around 10% of domestic demand. What the EU is cognizant of is the fact that the European continent doesn't have all the key minerals. So what they're trying to do is set more aggressive targets around processing. So they've learned from China's experience that having more processing happen domestically within the continent is going to be very important. The challenge, though, is that if you look at the EU approach and compare that with US IRA or Canada, which has also announced a critical minerals strategy, in the case of the EU, there's not much incentive, so there's no new money. Additionally, a lot of the red tape that exists in expanding supply chains in the EU are not being addressed directly. Canada and the US have done a little bit better on this front. Now, to be fair, the EU is also very much focused around improving the sustainability of these supply chains. So they put a higher priority on the supply chain sustainability, whereas the US Inflation Reduction Act has not done in a similar manner. But going back to the most important factor, money, while the US Inflation Reduction Act provides uncapped incentives, in the case of the EU, we're not talking about any new money. Of course, the EU already has an innovation fund that provides funding for these applications, but the EU Innovation Fund is very difficult to access. So since 2020, if you look at the number of applications which have been awarded 300, only 7 applications have been successful, which means it's very difficult for companies to actually access this funding. The EU also annually generates about 30 billion euros through its emission trading scheme, so it's through its carbon market. And this funding can be used for supporting manufacturing capacity build out. But the funding requirements for supporting deployment of these technologies are even higher. So in the case of batteries, if you look at the amount of funding required to support EV adoption by 2030 and compare that to the factory investment requirements, that deployment investment requirements is over 5 times. So the EU has to be a little bit careful around how they prioritize the funding. The other issue, of course, is that when you do domestic manufacturing, you can potentially increase your costs. What this chart is showing you is the historical lithium-ion battery average price trend. And in the case of Europe, if you look at average battery prices, historically, the average EV battery pack prices in Europe have been more expensive than China. Now, to be fair, part of this is a reflection of different technologies. So in China, the dominant battery chemistry is lithium iron phosphate, which has a much lower raw input material cost. Whereas in Europe, most of the existing battery manufacturing capacity has been around nickel, manganese, cobalt, which has higher input cost. But the other issue here is that China has had much bigger scale and much more competition in its battery manufacturing capacity. In Europe, this is just starting to come. But of course, labor cost, energy cost, and land cost in Europe are much higher than China. If you go back to EU's target of having 80% of its domestic demand by 2030 be met by domestic supply, then potentially we are talking about annually spending just under $12 billion more to hit this target. $12 billion is not necessarily an insurmountable amount, but it does require ensuring that the EU considers the impact on slowing down domestic uptake of these technologies due to higher costs. This is my last slide. Currently, if we analyze the announcements made by all companies based on location, we can still see that by 2027, China maintains its dominant position. Canada and US still are quite high. Korea and Japan also continue to do really well. To be fair, this is the picture in 2027 based on information today. That picture can certainly change. The US IRA certainly provides a lot more incentives than any other country today. So we may see that Canada and US will have their positions improve further. The European countries may face more pressure as some of the investment gets diverted, but ultimately as the overall market is growing, there's still enough opportunity for all major economies to succeed in the battery market. Thank you very much for your kind attention. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ali Jadi. And next, we'll show you the video on the battery startup ecosystem by James Frith, Volta Energy Technology Principal.
Hello, I'm James Frith, and I'm a principal at Volta Energy Technologies, a US-based venture capital company. Today I'm going to be talking about the lithium-ion battery industry from the point of view of a VC investor. Unfortunately, I can't be there in person today, but I'd like to thank the organisers for giving me this opportunity to discuss this topic, and for the audience for listening in. Hopefully you find this interesting, and if you have any follow-up questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to divide today's talk into 3 parts, and the first part is going to focus on the opportunity in batteries. As I'm sure most of you are aware, lithium-ion batteries have been around for about 30 years now, as they were first commercialized by Sony in the early 1990s. However, when they were first commercialized, they were used in small consumer electronic devices, such as camera recorders, and they slowly made their way into other consumer electronics, such as the smartphone. In fact, the 2000s were known as the decade of the smartphone, and these smartphones were really enabled by lithium-ion batteries. However, what happened is that as scale built in the consumer electronics industry, the cost of batteries came down, and by around 2010, they were cheap enough that they could start being integrated into electric vehicles, delivering EV products that had a minimum sufficient range and a cost that was higher than the equivalent internal combustion engine vehicles, but affordable enough for some early adopters. Now, what we've seen is that the market, since adoption into electric vehicles, the market for lithium-ion batteries has really significantly increased. It increased by about 5 times from 2015, going from about 50 gigawatt hours of annual capacity until 2020, whereas about 250 gigawatt hours of annual demand. And it's going to increase 5 times again by this year, in fact, where we suspect that there could be almost a terawatt hour of annual demand for lithium-ion batteries. But from an investment standpoint, what's really interesting is the size of the market. The market is going to be worth over $100 billion as soon as 2026. So there's a lot of value creation to be had there. There's also a lot of investment needed to support that industry, and that creates a huge opportunity for venture capital investors. As I mentioned on the previous slide, by the time we got to 2010, battery costs were low enough that they could conceivably be integrated into electric vehicles and deliver EVs that were more expensive than internal combustion engine vehicles, but still affordable for early adopters. Now, what's happened since then is the price of batteries have come down almost 90%, from over $1,000 per kilowatt hour back in 2010 to about $150 per kilowatt hour in 2022. And it should be noted that 2022 was an outlier year, with prices increasing and bucking the trend of the previous 10 years, where every year prices have fallen by anywhere between kind of 5 to 15%. And if we look at what's going to happen going forward, we expect battery prices to continue falling. But there is going to be a change in the reason for these price declines. If we look back to the last decade, a lot of the price declines that we've seen have been due to technology innovation, but actually a lot of them are also due to economies of scale, particularly in the supply chain and in manufacturing. However, as we reach minimum efficient scale, we find that actually there are not going to be that many more cost savings coming from the economies of scale. So the supply chains are almost as efficient as they can be. Similarly, manufacturing plants are as efficient as they can be, and increasing them in size much more won't get you many more savings. So really, in the next decade going forward, we expect that the majority of cost savings are going to come from technology innovations, alongside some small improvements from economies of scale, but really it's going to be that technology innovation that's going to be the main driver going forward. And again, this creates a huge opportunity for investors, and particularly for VC investors in early stage technologies. Now, I mentioned that economies of scale have been important in driving down prices, but so has increasing energy density. And this has really been the kind of main technology focus over the last decade for both automakers and cell manufacturers. So what we've seen is that energy density at the pack level has almost doubled, from about 100 watt hours per kilogram back in 2010 to an average of almost 200 watt hours per kilogram today, with some of the highest energy density packs being just over 200 watt hours per kilogram. And this is important because as you increase energy density, it means that you're using fewer kilograms of raw materials per kilowatt hour. So you're having savings there on the raw material side, but also on the manufacturing side, it means that you have more kilowatt hours contained in each cell that you're manufacturing. So the unit production cost per cell on a kilowatt hour basis is going to be lower as you increase energy density. And that's really why energy density improvements are so crucial. But we should also remember that as well as reducing prices, energy density improvements have also been pivotal in creating a product that consumers are happy with and has the kind of minimum performance requirements, such as driving ranges of 200, 300 miles. If we went back to the beginning of the decade, at 100 watt-hours per kilogram, you wouldn't be able to have a Tesla Model S with a driving range of over 300 miles. But now, as we approach energy densities closer to 200 watt-hours per kilogram at the pack level, that is very much achievable. And in fact, now many automakers are pushing for ranges closer to 500 miles on a single charge, although we're still a couple of years away from that. Now, when we look at the drivers behind these energy density improvements, actually there's one thing that we can see. The majority of cell manufacturers have been chasing these energy density improvements by changing the cathode. And in particular, the main trend that we've seen in the market has been going to higher nickel cathodes, so reducing the amount of expensive cobalt in there and increasing the content of relatively cheaper nickel. This, as I say, improves energy density. It reduces the raw material cost, one, because you're increasing energy density, so you need fewer kilograms of material per kilowatt hour, but also you're substituting a high cost material, cobalt, for a lower cost material, nickel. And really, if we look at the trend amongst cell manufacturers, they've really been chasing this kind of same technology development. So you can see the majority of manufacturers here adopting an NMC 811 cell, moving towards NMC 9.5.5, or indeed in some cases an NCA or NCMA. So these are very important kind of trends when we're thinking about how technology development has changed. And the reason that cell makers have largely been looking at kind of cathode improvements is because it's easier to integrate cathode improvements into the cell without having to change the entire cell design. You don't have to change the additives too much, and you know how things like the electrolyte are going to interact with these materials. Largely, there are still some small changes that are needed to go to higher energy density materials, but on the whole, it's far easier to make small incremental changes to the cathode than to other parts of the cell design. However, interestingly, in recent years, cell manufacturers have been looking to other areas of the system in order to kind of improve energy density and performance. In particular, the latest innovations have come not from changes to the chemistry, but changes to the system design, and in particular, the cell-to-pack technology introduced by Chinese OEMs over the last couple of years has been a pivotal move in improving the performance of these packs without having to change the inner workings of the system. So what these systems do is they essentially remove more inactive components to increase the volumetric and gravimetric energy density of these systems. The other trend that we're seeing is that as the cost of batteries decreases, the number of applications available to use batteries increases. And this also opens up the need for different performance metrics. So as the battery market improves, it's no longer just energy density that is becoming a focus, but other parts of the system as well. For example, there are companies like Iontra, who Volta has invested in, who are working on power electronics that can not only improve the cycle life of the system, but they can also improve the rate capability of these systems, so the fast charging ability of these systems, all by integrating new charging algorithms into the BMS, so not actually changing the inner chemistry at all. So for investors and developers, this is fantastic because it means as there are more applications and there are more use cases, there are more technologies that need to be developed and therefore more opportunities for investment. However, on the other side of it, it's also difficult because there's lots of different solutions that can be used to achieve the same results. We can see here over on the right-hand side of this figure that with two different systems, in orange we have the graphite with a little bit of silicon oxide in the anode with an NCA cathode, and the black representing graphite with an LFP anode. LFP cathode, sorry. you can see that although they have very different theoretical energy densities, by the time they're integrated into systems, you get to a similar energy density, but with different materials in there, different cost basis and different performance basis. So from an investor, being able to understand what trend is going to take off is really important, but it's also difficult. And this is really where the startup industry comes into it, because for a venture capital company, when you're making an investment into a new technology, you are generally looking at kind of long time horizons, maybe development times of 5 years or more. And you need to be able to invest in a technology that is going to be disruptive, so that when it's adopted, you get a return on your invested capital that reflects the time that you've been invested in that company and the value that you've added to it. So we're really looking for what we call step change technologies. Now, as I mentioned previously, cell manufacturers have largely been focused on developing kind of cathode technologies or changing the system design. And this has left developments in other areas, such as the anodes and electrolytes, open to innovation from startups where they can change big step-changing technologies, while the incumbent cell manufacturers are working to, generally develop small incremental improvements in the system. Although that's not always the case, it's sometimes hard to understand what is going on in these larger companies, as they do have R&D departments that are looking at some of these step change technologies as well, but they tend to be less agile and less able to try and bring these to market as quickly as the startup companies. So having discussed the opportunity in the battery industry, I'm now going to move on to discussing the difficulties in assessing new technologies and some of the considerations that venture capital investors have to have. So I'm going to start off by talking about some of the points from this recent paper, 10 Ways to Fool the Masses When Presenting Battery Research. Now, this journal article is really aimed at academia, but there's a lot of lessons in here that are also relevant to the venture capital space. And I've taken 4 of these 10 points out just to kind of highlight some of the troubles that you can go through, even as an experienced researcher, when looking at new technologies. And therefore, as a VC, these are, of course, kind of very relevant to you, particularly if you don't have a scientific background. So what you often see is that when companies are presenting their data, rather than presenting their results compared to the state of the art today, or even what they expect the state of the art to be in, say, 5 years' time when they commercialize their technology, you often see historical benchmarks being used. So in particular, as we see here, comparing results against state of the art from 2010. And as we saw earlier, back in 2010, pack level energy densities were closer to 100 watt-hours per kilogram, whereas today the state of the art is closer to 200 watt-hours per kilogram. So it's important to make sure that you're comparing the results against a kind of correct benchmark. You often see on the kind of cost basis, companies will quote their costs only based on the terms of the raw materials used. So they might say, oh, well, we're using very cheap raw materials, therefore our total system cost is going to be lower as well. But they're perhaps not considering some of the processing costs that are involved, or indeed impacts on, say, energy density, which means that the manufacturing cost is going to be higher than the incumbent technology. So that's always one to watch out for. What you often see missing in results that are presented, both in academia and again when talking to early stage companies, are errors. People don't like to talk about errors because it suggests that their technology might not work. Whereas in fact, understanding what the errors are tells you a lot about the technology, its performance, and what the potential barriers to adoption are, or what needs to be overcome before it can be adopted. I like this last one. If all else fails, show pretty pictures. Now, I have a scientific background and I love looking at high resolution pictures on the nanoscale, so SEM images, for example, where you can see the surface of anodes or cathodes, or you can see nanowires growing off different materials. They look great, but it doesn't tell you much. So don't lose sight of what you're actually trying to find out when you see glossy pictures. At Volta, we use what are known as technology readiness levels when we're trying to assess new technologies and new companies. These were initially developed by NASA in the 1970s to understand how long it would take a new product to reach market in the aerospace industry. At Volta, we use them from a technical perspective to understand whether the basic science is understood, so this would be the kind of research, TRLs 1 to 3. Have the basic science and principles been understood and developed? TRLs 4 through 6 tell you about the ease of scaling up the new technology. So this is, I guess, what you would consider kind of pilot stage, taking technology out of the lab and seeing if you can apply it to industrial-based manufacturing processes. And then TRL 7 through 9 are really when you're looking at a technology that is close to commercialization, you're working alongside a customer to put your technology into systems and to try and test it under real world conditions. You're also getting close to manufacturing at a mass scale on commercial manufacturing equipment. TRL scales can also be used from a commercial perspective, because not only do they tell you how far along in development a technology is, you can also use them to estimate how much investment will be required to take them from the stage that they're at to commercialization and to develop them along each stage. So you can see, for example, it may cost $10,000 to $100,000 to develop a technology at TRL 2, but if you're getting up to TRL 8, 9, when you're close to serial production, you're probably going to have to be investing over $1 billion in manufacturing systems. And this is very specifically kind of talking about batteries going into automotive applications. The other thing that TRL scales tell you is roughly the timeline for development. So you can see with lithium-ion batteries that if you're in that kind of TRL 1 to 3 time zone, you're looking at maybe a 10 to 15 year development time. If you're looking at kind of TRL 5 through 6, 5 to 10 years, and TRL 7 plus, you may still have more than or up to 5 years of technology development needed before you start generating revenue from that system. So it's a very capital intensive industry. And for investors, understanding the timeframes and the capital requirements is key to having a successful investment in a company. If you think you can invest in a battery technology and get a return within 1 year, you're probably going to be slightly shocked when it takes 5 or 6 years before you have a finished product, and maybe a couple of years after that before it's commercially adopted. What's not seen in the TRL scales is some of the other problems that we often come across. So one is commercial adoption. This is not straightforward. With hard technologies in the lithium-ion battery industry, developers really need to be working alongside their end customer to understand what the metrics and qualification processes are to adoption. Doing this in isolation is very difficult, and it means that when you do start working with a customer, you probably have to start changing your product. So making sure that you're working with a customer is crucial, and it's something that we often look for in early stage companies, to see if you have that customer engagement and you know that the technology has demand. The other one is supply chains and manufacturing scale up. This is something that is often overlooked. It can be difficult enough to get hold of the raw materials that are used in lithium-ion batteries today, particularly with new policy introductions such as the US IRA, which limits the countries where you can source these materials. If you're developing a new technology that requires this supply chain to be scaled up with it, this adds additional complexity, which is not easy. And finally, both of these are related to the high capital costs of this industry. It's not simple and easy just to develop technology, as we discussed. It takes time, and what we increasingly find is that many early stage companies will have to build their own manufacturing plant, at least for their initial small scale production. This comes with a lot of cost. So when we're looking at investments, we need to understand what the future capital requirements are and what that will do to our investment. If we owned 10% of the company, but then it needs to raise another $1 billion, that's going to dilute us down. And after that raise, perhaps we'll only own 5%, which could hurt our returns. And let's not forget that as VC investors, while we're trying to bring new technologies to market, we are also looking to get a return on the capital that we've invested. So in practicality, what does this mean? Well, this is a snapshot of Volta's pipeline, and it's slightly out of date. It's from about a year ago, but you can see over a 5-year period from 2017 to 2022, we received over 300 opportunities, and these are opportunities where we initially kind of spoke to the company. We had more opportunities before that we had funneled out, and from these 300 opportunities, we made 22 investments in 13 companies. So there's a lot of analysis that has to be done to find the best opportunities in the market, to make sure that the technology is needed by the market, that it has a problem that it's solving rather than a solution looking for a problem, and that the timescales are in line with our investing criteria, which is that we're looking for a return within a kind of 5-year timescale. And so you can see on the right-hand side of this figure as well, the breakdown of the different investments that we've made. And it's important to remember that, for example, over in the top right-hand corner, this is our portfolio by TRL stage. And below that, we have our portfolio by venture capital series. And what's interesting and worth highlighting here is that the TRL levels do not necessarily represent a certain stage on the kind of VC funding rounds. So Series A, for example, is not going to be TRL 2 to 4 in every instance, which is why from Volta's perspective, understanding TRL scales is more important than looking at the different series that you're investing in. So having done a brief overview of the factors that Volta is considering when we're looking at making investments in the startup space for lithium-ion batteries, I'm now going to give a quick example of Volta's thesis for investing in silicon anodes for electric vehicles. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, the main technology developments that we've seen in lithium-ion batteries over the last decade has been changes to the cathode. But as we start to reach the limits of cathode improvement, we're now looking to other areas of the battery to change the chemistry and to improve performance, and particularly energy density. And nothing is more promising than silicon, which has been in development for a long time now, but it looks like it's getting closer to commercial adoption in the next 2 to 3 years, with Mercedes-Benz expecting to adopt Silane Nano's silicon material as early as 2025 or 2026. But what's interesting about this is that while silicon not only offers to improve the energy density of these systems, one of its great promises is also reducing cost further. And what we expect is that with a low enough cost silicon material, you can open up the highest proportion of the market. So in the US, for example, the portion of the market that is vehicles below $40,000, and that's 80% of sales. So with the right silicon material, you can increase energy density and also reduce your raw material costs. But this is crucial. You have to have a technology that has a cost down trajectory. Without that, you can't open up that market. And so while it's great to see Mercedes adopting Silane's technology, it's worth remembering that this is going to be in a vehicle that is priced at over $100,000 and is not going to be accessible to everyone. So when we're looking at silicon materials, there's a number of different technologies that we can turn to in order to adopt them. We have silicon oxides, silicon carbon composites, and pure silicon. And each of these different technologies has their own advantages and disadvantages. And again, there's a number of startups working in these spaces. But what Volta sees as the nearest term adoption route is the use of silicon carbon composites or silicon carbon materials, and within that I include silicon graphite materials. So here you can see some of the advantages and disadvantages of each of these approaches. So for example, silicon oxide has a lower capacity than the other materials, but it can be easily integrated into cell manufacturing at low silicon contents, and in fact is already commercially adopted. It doesn't undergo some of the kind of common problems associated with silicon, such as volume expansion, and it is relatively stable, so you don't have a lot of electrolyte degradation, and therefore cycle life isn't impacted too much. Silicon carbon, for example, has a lower capacity than pure silicon, but is easier to adopt into automotive cells because you can dope it in at lower levels, increasing the capacity of the anode slowly in a similar way to the way that cathode improvements have been achieved over the last decade or so. And finally, pure silicon is the eventual end goal for use in these systems. And while they have the highest capacity out there, they can be very complex to integrate into manufacturing processes because you have to deal with things like volume and pressure changes within the system. So while these offer the highest kind of performing systems, they are the furthest away from adoption. Whereas I say silicon oxide is already in use today, silicon carbon will be adopted in the next couple of years. Pure silicon is unlikely to be adopted in EVs until closer to the end of this decade, if at all. However, one of the other considerations when looking at the silicon market is that although these startups have largely dominated the anode material space, there are a lot of other companies out there, established companies that are working on silicon still and thinking about how you integrate it into the system, and have therefore created IP around other areas of the cell, such as anodes, such as the anode itself. So this is the coated anode, thinking about the binders, what binders are required to integrate silicon, any electrolyte additives, and any other cell designs that are required. So when looking at opportunities in silicon, you not only have to consider if the material itself is unique, you have to consider if the company has freedom to operate, freedom to integrate its systems into a commercial cell. And this is difficult, and you'll often find that a company will not be able to integrate its system without taking a license from a third party. So having talked through some of the kind of considerations of investing in the silicon space, I'm now going to talk through Volta's investment thesis for investing in 1D, a US-based developer of silicon graphite materials for use in lithium battery anodes. So the first point here is that they have a simple manufacturing process that uses equipment that was developed for the solar industry and is readily available and can be very easily scaled up from the pilot stage that they're at today up to full commercial scale without the need for new engineering or design processes. The second point is that 1D has a clear cost down trajectory. They calculate that the cost of growing silicon nanowires and graphite is less than $20 per kilogram. Now, when you convert this to a per kilowatt hour basis, as we use when we're looking at the cost of batteries, that works out as $2 per kilowatt hour. Now, that's fantastic because it's lower cost than the incumbent anode technology, graphite, which is about $8 per kilowatt hour. So as you start doping graphite with these silicon nanowires, what you're going to find is that the cost of your anode is reduced, and suddenly you're going to not only be increasing energy density, but really unlocking that kind of key part of silicon, which is reducing cost as well, and opening up that 80% of the market that in the US, vehicles are priced at less than $40,000. So that was a crucial differentiator for us compared to some of the other silicon technologies that we've looked at, that there is a cost down trajectory that gets you cheaper than the incumbent technology. Now, the third point is a business model. 1D is planning on licensing this technology rather than building out manufacturing plants itself. From an investor's point of view, this means there's less risk around needing to raise capital in the future, and also that we're not going to be diluted down as billions in new capital comes into the company. It should also make it easier for the company to scale up and commercialize its technology. The fourth point is commercial traction and third-party validation. So alongside Volta Energy Technologies investing in 1D, the US automaker GM also made an investment. And from Volta's point of view, this shows us that one, that there is commercial demand for these materials, that there is a partner that is going to help 1D understand the specifications that it needs to meet to be introduced into their vehicles. And as a partner, GM has relationships with cell manufacturers, and it can work with those cell manufacturers to get this material introduced into cells, which is far easier than 1D having to convince cell manufacturers to introduce the material and then go out and convince their customers to use it. The fifth point is IP protection. 1D has over 240 patents granted globally and has freedom to operate across the industry. So we are not concerned that once it has a commercial product, that it could be stopped from commercializing this by a third party that is claiming patent infringement. The sixth part is the supply chain. Now, there's still some work to do here, but 1D has a clear, defined strategy to grow its supply chain and bring on board the suppliers that it needs to work with. And this is helped, of course, by having the relationship with GM, who can also work with those suppliers to convince them that this is the company to be working with in order to realize this dream. So having given you a quick tour of how venture capital companies think about investing in the battery industry, I'm just going to conclude some of the key points from this. And you'll recognize that many of these are similar points that we saw from that academic journal article, 10 ways to fool people with your battery research results. But I think what is crucial here is to always be critical of the results reported, and where possible, seek third-party validation so that you know that these are representative results, not just cherry-picked results. You also need to consider the technology. Can it lower the costs and come in at a cost that is lower than the incumbent technology? This is again important for adoption of these new systems, because you need to show that not only is performance improved, but also costs are lower. And finally, what is the business model? Will the company need to raise billions more in the future, or is this the end of the line and it's now just commercializing the technology from here? You also need to think about how protectable is the technology, and this is specifically thinking about the IP protection, not only on the technology that they've developed, but the ability to integrate it into a full system. Also, is that the manufacturing process scalable? Does it differ from what is currently in use? Does it require completely new manufacturing equipment, or are these off-the-shelf bits of kit that you can easily acquire today? And finally, what does the supply chain look like? Is it developed already, or are they going to have to develop this as they're building up their new product and technology? I'm going to leave it there. I hope you've enjoyed this talk, and again, please reach out with any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Even though I could not see him, but thank you very much. James Frith is very informative and very knowledgeable on the guidelines for the battery startups, how to get the investment from the abroad. I hope many startups of battery in Korea would like to apply to the Volta energy technology. Thank you. And in particular, the presentation is organized by the Ali Jadi, and I much appreciate Ali to arrange this nice video. Thank you very much. Our next presentation is the battery SME and startup and best practice. And the first speaker is the Scott Bang, Greenergy CEO and then co-founder of the Greenergy. Thank you. Send warm applause.
Thank you very much. I would love to see more startups involved in this activity. There are, in Korea, battery industry appears to be understood as the area the conglomerates are in it. But as we just saw from Volta's presentation, there are many, many startups globally that are not only working on materials, but cell manufacturing and recyclability as well. And also, one topic that I would like to see change is that energy density is not the only characteristics that is required by battery. Standard Energy and Greenergy, we're working on a next generation battery that's not just focusing on energy density, but really enables other industries that have not been electrified to be electrified much sooner. That means that especially power density, life cycle of the battery, and the fast charge capability, and environmentally friendliness. So Greenergy is a Korean startup that was established in 2017. Greenergy stands for Green Innovation in Energy, and we're trying to provide technical solutions to the industries that have not been electrified yet. And Mr. Che mentioned that how startups in Korea can attract funding. We attract funding by addressing the pain point that market is currently facing today. Lithium-ion batteries revolutionized battery industries and enabled mobile devices and electric vehicles. However, there are significant challenges that we still need to overcome. First, the safety risk. We have faced with many electric vehicle fires in various countries and various applications. And also inadequate versatility. What does that mean? In very cold weather, we see the battery electric vehicles reducing its driving range by as much as 50%. And also inadequate life cycle. The current lithium-based batteries, it may be sufficient for mobile devices and electric cars, but is far short to satisfy the lifetime demand from various industrial applications, such as ocean-going vessels, heavy equipment, and industrial equipment. And another aspect is that the lead-acid battery, which was invented 250 years ago, is still widely used. There are about 40% of all energy provided battery is still provided by lead-acid battery. According to one of the studies done by UN in 2019, a UN looked at all death in Bangladesh and concluded that 3.4% of all deaths are related to lead poisoning. This is a significant. Not only lead, but the acid that is used. I'm not trying to take any credit away from lead-acid battery. They did an incredible job in terms of recycling the lead-acid battery and reuse. However, that's only all these recyclings are done properly. But the fact is that all these wasted lead-acid batteries are shipped to underdeveloped countries and still being recycled by manually and creating a lot of not only health issues, but environmental issues. So what Green Energy has done is that we took a lithium titanate material to develop next generation anode and replace the current graphite anode. By doing so, we revolutionized safety and fast charge capability and cold temperature, and we improved the life cycle of the battery. I apologize. It looks like the font is incorrect. As we are revolutionizing the safety, fast charging, cold temperature, and life cycle, but the LTO battery is not the silver bullet to all the solutions. Because we have a low voltage, so we are actually challenged by the less energy density compared to traditional lithium-ion batteries. Well, we'll talk through this. As we all know, the rechargeable battery market is going to grow significantly. By 2030, the battery industry is expected to grow about $350 billion. Many lithium-based batteries are going to grow faster than anybody else because the increase and the demand from electric vehicles. But however, as you can see here, light green or lead-acid battery and cadmium batteries are represented by a light green colors. Those two battery chemistry are still going to grow, and they're going to grow to about $120 billion by 2030. And this means that LTO battery can replace these old technologies. We also can take some part in terms of lithium-based that are used for battery, the electric buses and heavy equipment. So this is a Green Energy's 20 amp hour LTO battery cell that's in production today. Although we are less energy efficient or less in terms of energy density, we provide significant improvement in terms of power density and life cycle and low temperature performance. Forget these numbers. We're comparing, in the spider chart on the right, we're comparing a lithium-based battery, lead-acid battery in orange, and Green Energy's LTO battery in green. Lithium-based batteries cannot replace lead-acid battery because of safety and low temperature performance. However, the LTO solution can provide a technology that can replace lead-acid battery in terms of safety and low temperature performance, at the same time delivering the energy density that is equivalent to a lithium-based batteries. This is a movie clip. Can I play this? So this is an example of LTO battery and its safety. This shows a penetration testing. On the right is a lithium-based battery that's used by mobile phones, and on the right is a fully charged LTO battery that is subjected to a nail penetration. On the left, the traditional lithium-ion battery is, because of when it's subjected to a nail penetration, it's going to create a short, and the lithium is going to be the fuel to explode. But LTO battery it's just boring video clip because it's safe. This technology, the cell that we're producing today, it has been homologated globally, so it is being produced in Chungju, Korea. And we have started commercialization in 2022, and we're in process of creating revenues, and we are in process of building our first serial production plant in Korea, which has 2 million cell production capacity by 2025. Then, people are going to ask, LTO is very unique, but is Green Energy the only company that can produce LTO? It is not. LTO material was developed by a company in Japan in 2005. However, the differentiating factors are form factors, manufacturing method, and various compositions. By doing so, Green Energy produces the highest energy LTO battery in the world today. With this differentiating factors, Green Energy is addressing the demand from various industries. Lithium-based battery enabled electric cars and mobile devices. However, the industries that still use diesel as a fuel, it is slow to electrify today because of its life cycle demand, power output demand, and the reliability in terms of various weather conditions. Green Energy is providing battery solutions to heavy industries, ocean-going vessels, train and trams, and the energy storage system today. These are some of the examples of the projects that we have been involved. In 2019, we have been contracted by a Korean DoD to develop a lead-acid battery replacement for military vehicles. That led us to an Innovation Award in 2023 CES, and also that led us to work with the US DoD to develop a lead-acid battery for US and the NATO military vehicles. And we're also providing a lot of battery solutions for smart robots, winter mobility, and train and heavy equipment. However, Green Energy's next growth will come from energy storage system. In Korea, energy storage system industry faced a significant safety concerns, and the whole industry has been halted. In 2025, Green Energy is contracted to provide 1.3 megawatt hours for various energy storage systems in Korea, and that also led us to a development project with the largest shipbuilder in the world to provide an electrification solution for ocean-going vessels. We'll go into a little bit more details on the projects that we are involved. In 2022, we have completed a R&D project with the Korean DoD, and we're also listed as a lead-acid battery replacement for White Book by Korean military. That product has led us to win an Innovation Award in 2023 CES in category of smart energy. And this project now and lead-acid battery replacement project is reached out to US DoD, and we're also working with the Korean Air Force and various vehicle applications. And this is an example of a 60 LTO battery for US military. We have completed a technical review, and we are waiting for a budget approval by US DoD. And next is a LTO battery as a main battery source for different applications. Early on, we have provided batteries for smart robots. During COVID, there are many smart robots were utilized to provide a security for buildings. So at night, they're autonomously monitoring building safeties, but because of the safety risk for robots, or the safety risk for lithium-based batteries, it experienced fires and explosions by robots. So many smart robot suppliers were looking for safe battery, and we were selected to produce batteries for Case Lab in Korea, Advanced Robot Solutions in US, and recently we've been working with the neighbor labs to provide battery pack for robots. And that led us to a development with a Corail system. We're providing auxiliary power unit for a hydrogen high-speed train, and we're just wrapping up R&D projects. And we're also in process of commercializing auxiliary power unit for subway systems in number of cities in Korea. And this also led us to a electrification of yard tractor in harbor. These containers, when they are received in harbors, they are actually pulled by a diesel-powered tug trucks. However, next generation tug trucks are going to be electrified, and we're working with a company called EN Plus to develop next generation electric yard tractors. And as mentioned earlier, energy storage system is going to be Green Energy's future growth. We developed a portable power station that operates in very cold weather, at the same time providing excellent power output to charge electric cars. That technology led us to a contract with the GridWiz in Korea to develop 1.3 megawatt energy storage system for industrial applications and EV stations. And that project finally got us a development contract with the largest shipping builder in Korea to provide prototype of energy storage system for ocean-going vessels. LTO is going to be our cash cow for the next few years. However, as I mentioned earlier, the lower voltage is our biggest challenge. So combining our technology with a solid-state electrolyte, we are going to introduce high-voltage LTO battery in 2025, and the solid-state electrolyte is going to lead us to a solid-state battery, combining with our electrolyte technology and the lithium metal technology. So Green Energy is also working on next generation electrolyte solid-state battery. However, we are taking a little bit different approach. We are approaching utilizing a gel-type or polymer-type electrolyte and lithium metal. By doing so, we can improve a charging efficiency, but at the same time, we can deliver much safer solid-state battery. So all these development, Green Energy has filed 17 patents. 9 of them are already registered, and we also filed 7 global PCT. So Green Energy's technology and IP are well protected. And we can actually do this because our leadership has very strong experience in terms of battery electric vehicle, consumer electronics, and battery technology. Myself worked at a Hyundai, Tesla, and Apple leading engineering teams for electric vehicles. And I'm supported by Dr. Cho, who has 30 years of experience working on electrolyte from Samsung SDI. With this technology and experience, we're projected to grow to become about $300 million revenue company by 2027. And in order to achieve that, Green Energy is in process of constructing a 2 million cell per year serial production in Yeoju, Korea. We recently have received all the construction permits, and Green Energy is going to break ground in July of 2023. Utilizing the solar power and energy storage system, Greenergy is going to build one of the greenest battery manufacturing site in Korea. And I'm going to wrap up my presentation as our next home of Greenergy's serial production plant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, CEO Bang Sung-yong. And next speaker is that Kim Boo-ki, and then CEO of the Standard Energy. Send a warm applause.
스탠다드 에너지 대표
I'm Kim Boo-ki, CEO of Standard Energy. Here we have many Koreans, so I will do my presentation in Korean. So today I will be talking about battery, but from a different perspective. In the global battery market, there are two large axes. So CEO Bang has done a marvelous presentation. So global battery is divided to EV battery and ESS battery. So EV is a moving thing, and ESS is stationary. It is for energy storage. So battery is this only same word that is shared, but the battery performance should be different. So moving batteries needs to be small and light. But for ESS, we don't need small and light, but we need green and efficiency and stability. So from my perspective, when it comes to lithium-ion battery, they are the best to be used in moving objects like EV, but ESS are a little bit different. We need high capacity, safe, and efficiently. So for ESS, we need a new type of battery. So today, I will not be talking about lithium-ion battery, but a new vanadium-ion battery that is born for ESS. Before I talk about vanadium-ion battery, Standard Energy was the first to actually create this battery. Standard Energy was the world's first vanadium-ion battery technology company. We are currently located in Daejeon. We have 3 factories located in Daejeon. In these 3 factories, we handle all the raw materials, cells, and the manufacturing of the system, assembly of the system. We hold 149 patents. And again, we were able to raise funds, about 96 billion won. The most recent company is Lotte Chemical, a global chemical company. Currently, Standard Energy and Lotte Chemical have a strategic partnership to enter the ESS market. Currently, Standard Energy has 140 employees. This is a picture of our company. This is our research center. And this is our battery cell test room. We also assembled our own test system. We can simultaneously test 1,000 cells at a time. So this is our factory. And this is our electrolyte used for our batteries. I will now show you a short video about vanadium battery. So the last thing you saw is actually taken from our real factory. So when we talk about vanadium battery, you might have heard about vanadium redox flow battery. So for about 4 years after we initiated, we produced this vanadium redox flow battery. There were some goods and bads of this type of battery, and high efficiency and safety and good output and life cycle was not there. So we made a lot of effort, and then we came up with this new product, the vanadium ion battery. So compared to vanadium redox flow battery, we have new technologies, and also we have new material technologies. And actually we excluded the pump from vanadium redox flow battery. We use a new technology called microfluidics. And soon a standard will be announced for vanadium ion battery, and it is classified as a totally new type of battery. This is a real product. And inside the vanadium ion battery, there are a lot of things stacked. So in this vanadium ion battery, there is a unique separator technology inside. And also we have a liquid electrode for anode and cathode, and we have also solid electrode based on carbon. We use microfluidics to stability and balancing technology. And again, this is why we have so much patents here. Vanadium ion battery statistics are here. So the most important thing is energy efficiency to store high capacity energies, because we have to store without losing it. And we have 97% of efficiency in watt hour. And we have 5C rate continuous power. And when we do a 10,000 cycle, it only loses 5% of its efficiency. It will be at 95%. In our company, actually, we tested up to 70,000 cycle. After 70,000 cycles of charging, it was stable enough. And safety is everything. Recently, there's been a fire accident in EVs and ESS. Some of you might even got a trauma, and we have to secure the safety. Vanadium ion battery is based of water, and because of the liquid electrode, we have zero fire hazard, and also we have economics. Again, ignition risk. We don't have any penetration, we don't have any overcharging, and even exposed to 1,000 degrees Celsius, it has no ignition risk. So currently you don't have to worry about fire. One more thing I want to mention is thousands of battery technologies come out, but almost none of them are actually commercialized. The reason is not all batteries can be used for large capacities. So the batteries we know are AC/DC batteries, and they need to put together to be in a large capacity, and it's not that easy to do. And clustering is needed for these type of batteries. We have to think about the cycle and BOP for clustering. And with this, we can only have a larger capacity of batteries. So a large system does not come from only linking the cells together. We have to have a proper batteries and proper characteristics. We need power management system and power conditioning system. Without these, we cannot form a larger system with batteries. That is why we focused on vanadium ion batteries and cell characteristics. And we also wanted all the batteries to be uniform, and this uniformity is something we looked for. So Standard Energy has everything for vanadium ion battery in-house. We have our materials, and currently all the liquid electrodes are manufactured in our factories. And the vanadium ion battery cells are assembled in our factory. And to efficiently link these batteries, monitoring and balancing systems, BMS, is also done in-house. And PMS, for an efficient control of the system, is here in-house. So we can have everything to provide a stable vanadium ion battery system. So from the beginning, VIB is born for ESS, only for ESS. But here at IEVE, the reason why I'm here is that this battery is not born for EVs, but actually it has connection with EV. Because one of the applications of ESS is EV superfast charging infra. I will now show you a short video. So for simultaneous charging, we know that the speed of charging will be decreased because we need more peak wattage. If ESS supports the peak wattage, this can be solved. If the energy usage goes up, the power supply can be unstable. But ESS can change everything. So ESS, most of all, should be free from fire hazards. It should be equipped with high output, high efficiency, and long lifespan, and be less affected by external temperature. All this is vanadium ion battery ESS from Standard Energy. So this high-performing vanadium ion ESS can be applied to a lot of places. Renewable energy, green ships, and EV chargers. We can be all together heading for a better future. You are now experiencing the new ESS. So in this video, the system looks like this. This is a real system. This is a vanadium ion battery ESS. Last year, May 18th, we installed this in Gangnam area at the center of Seoul. So since 18th May last year, we are utilizing this ESS. So you can see the vanadium battery ESS and the superfast charger linked to this ESS. This is the VIB ESS installed. You can have a look at the vanadium ore. We do not use raw materials. We don't use raw rare earth materials. And what we thought is that we have to use more type of materials we can frequently use. So again, we don't use rare earth for our VIB battery. This is vanadium ore. It's actually mined from Gyeonggi Province, Korea. So as you can see, the vanadium ion battery, this is an ESS system. It can be linked to renewable energies like solar or wind, but also it can be provided as ESS for superfast chargers. The charger installed here, the charger is supplied by VIB ESS. You can actually do the charging here. We offer free charging, so before it turns paid, please visit this place. And just for your information, we got a design award for this charging station. So this is how it works. At the end, you have a EV charger, and it is connected to the grid and ESS electricity that is mixed hybrid. So the response time is very quick, and we needed a fast ESS, and VIB is what we needed. The EV charger, the maximum output is 200 kilowatts. 100 kilowatts is applied from grid stably, and more needed is from the VIB ESS. So it's kind of hybrid system. So this is how the electricity changes. Yeah, it fluctuates from the ESS and from the grid. And amazingly enough, to supply this high speed charger, we only needed 40 kilowatts hour ESS, which means that even small output ESS can support these fast charging infra. And this is very important for this type of high speed chargers. And since the ESS output is very low, the vanadium battery needs to be utilized in harsh circumstances. We were quite trusting the battery, so we were able to do this testing. Since last May, and we collected data until last month. So for vanadium batteries, they went through a daily charge and discharge cycle of 7.8 cycles per day. So this is very different from the ESS we already know. There's a lot of charge-discharge cycles, and it went through that. So it was very stable, and we plan to use our VIBs in fast-charging infras. Again, for this timeline, we supported 93.5 megawatt hours, which is about 1,300 EV cars. Currently, we are doing a membership charging, and we got feedback from all the users. What they liked the most is the stable fast charging. You can actually experience that. So we learned a lot from this, and this was a backup for our reason why we use VIB for ESS. Again, this is our charging station. What we want to do is just one thing. We can put this in one phrase. Regardless of grid status, we want to provide stable high-power electricity with this ESS. And with EV dissemination, we know that this fast charging station should always be disseminated, and we will do our best for new charging stations. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. We are very amazing with the two cases, and it will be very helpful for the young startups how to make success in the near future. I will have the question and answer session very briefly, and then a few minutes later, they will arrange three tables. 여기 지금 하고 있는 거는 여기에 계시는 분만 보는 게 아니고 제주의 소개 방송으로
This meeting is broadcast live and YouTube participants are in this meeting as well. So the number of participants can be more than 1,000.
Live broadcasting. So not only here, not only the attendance, but also the other persons through the live broadcasting, YouTube, and then Jeju Sound. And then I think lots of people are listening and watching, and they are learning. And would you please come up to the front? 방송용 대표님, 앞으로 좀 나와주시겠어요?
Mr. Bang and Mr. Kim, please come up to the stage. Thank you.
질문 있으신 분은
If you have any questions, please put up your questions. If you raise your hand, we will give you a microphone.
Actually, the Professor Choi-Ung-chul will preside these question and answer sessions, but unfortunately, he is not here. So we'll ask several questions from the participants. 그리고 질문 좀 해주시면 감사하겠습니다. 질문하실 때는 누구에게 질문하시는지.
Could you ask questions if you raise your hand?
우선 저 마지막
So a question to Standard Energy, CEO Kim Boo-ki, a question for you. So during your presentation, I noticed that currently this is a supply for charging station, and you mentioned safety. And ESS is stationary; it does not move. So lithium battery safety, when it comes to lithium-ion battery safety, it's not that much. But my question is about density. Say if ESS itself can be used to charging. So how much is the difference with the current existing charging stations? Yes, thank you for the question. When we are designing our charging station, so the VIB standard will be coming out very soon. So I went through the regulation sandbox of Korea. So last month also, lithium-ion battery ESS got a fire accident. And the reason why ESS is stagnant was lithium-ion battery fire accident. And currently, we see many fire accidents also. So we have to focus on the safety, because for our ESS market to rebound, we have to have absolute safety guarantee. So that was the reason why I mentioned that. When we were doing the VIB technology, this vanadium-ion battery, compared to lithium-ion and other batteries, energy density is lower. The reason is we call it a water-based battery. It is water-based. So technically, compared to lithium-ion battery, the energy density is lower. To overcome that, we search for some technologies. One is, when it comes to energy density, we are pushing it up. In this year, we were able to have 20% upgrade for our energy density. We will continue to increase that. Second, when it comes to VIBs, compared to lithium-ion batteries, when they are installed, not all companies, but most of them, to prevent fire, we have a lot of supplies to prevent fire and stronger racks. But VIBs does not all this support. So we were thinking about the system energy density of the ESS. The third thing is the capacity. So we can have less installation capacity. So that can lead to a smaller system and more economically. But to realize that, what we need for battery technology, this high output technology and a lot of discharge cycle, the efficiency have to be the same. So again, we went through the regulation sandbox last May, and we are just testing our system until now. One amazing thing is that actually we installed ESS in the heart of the city where there's a lot of people. But how many technologies can install ESS in the heart of the city? I don't think there are many. Of course, we need ESS in remote areas like power plants, but we think that where there is a fast charging infrastructure, we have an ESS that can be installed in the city. So everything combined together, we have this Apgujeong Highmart site in the heart of the Gangnam area. Thank you.
차종은 관계없는.
So you can have all kind of EV models. Is that right? Yes. We charge more than 20 models. In every EV model, the manufacturer and the model, even the color, we put everything in our database. So one more thing, directly. When it comes to Tesla, they have a supercharging station. And the timing, the supercharging from the supercharging station and from the vanadium ESS, which is the time different? So currently, the Tesla supercharger and current other chargers, the timing is not that different. In US, Tesla have also their ESS business in their charger in the US. So they have already some site linked with ESS in the US. So you can actually look for this in the internet, but they had an unfortunate accident. So what we do is different from Tesla. We have a DC combo, but one day everything will be compatible in the future. So even in the city and even off-grid, the ESS can be linked to charging station in the future. So that is what we believe. So my question is, if I am riding in my vehicle and if I am driving a Tesla, if I have a supercharging Tesla station, then up to 80% charging, Tesla takes about 20 to 25 minutes. If I don't see any Tesla superstation and I call the ESS moving charging car, up to 80% charge, how much it will take, how long it will take. Actually, we had some data like this. Answer to that is from our charger. It is less than 15 minutes. But as you're well aware, even if we have good system, the EV have to be able to handle that. For example, in the winter, the lithium-ion battery temperature goes low, and even we have high output, the EV cannot handle that. So fast charging cannot done in the EV. So what we are doing is to build an infra for this type of charging. And many auto OEMs are doing their best to stabilize this battery system. So this is not what we can do by ourselves, but also help from auto OEMs. Thank you.
Okay.
Are there other questions? Yes, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Anyone? Yeah, there's one gentleman. Thank you for your presentation. My question is about ESS. But we are interested in hydrogen as well. I'd like to know about the efficiency of hydrogen ESS. So what do you think about hydrogen efficiency?
시고요.
So for efficiency, I already mentioned our numbers. And for hydrogen storage, we are also hearing a lot of them. But we have quite some results already done for that. For example, if we provide electricity, if we produce hydrogen with that, we store them. And when we need electricity, we will use hydrogen batteries. And we have to think about how many steps we go through. That will lead to the final efficiency number. But I'm not sure. You have reasons for this type of system. But for efficiency-wise, we want to have less steps for more efficiency. So the numbers I mentioned and the hydrogen conversion numbers that you mentioned, I'm sure you can have a number right away. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. Another answer is that in terms of ESS, what about fossil fuel generation? So it's generated through fossil fuels, or are you using renewable energies? So which method are you using for ESS at the moment? And ultimately, you are going to use renewable energy sources. That's what I think.
네, 그렇습니다.
Yes, exactly. So of course, ESS is not a power generation tool. It's a storing tool. So we don't actually mind where it comes from. When we have electricity, we store them. And when we need it, we can use that. So the source is quite agnostic. But why ESS is so much important today, think about that, is of course because it is very much linked to renewable energy, like you mentioned. So for renewable energy, the output is very unstable, and to actually assist that, we need ESS. So ESS linked with EV charger is our future model. One of our projects here is AliBek RE100. So actually, this is something what we are doing right now, RE100 project. And of course, we use commercial energy, and there is a single model that we are working on that can encompass everything.
Thank you for your answer. Are there any other questions?
네, 여기 저쪽.
Yes, please.
우리 저 방송용 대표님한테도 좀 질문.
Please throw questions to Mr. Bang as well. Sorry, I'm interested in batteries. Recently, I visited motor shows. So I found that LFP, so low-cost ESS are being released. So I think LFP is emerging in terms of cost and prices. I think rather than using LFP, I think VIB is better. I mean, I'd like to ask about how much better in terms of price using VIB, and also LFP's voltage range is more stable than lithium battery. But what about VIB? I'd like to know about the level of the voltage.
네.
Thank you for the question. Thank you very much. So LFP batteries you mentioned, it's a lithium-based battery. So again, we have a lithium battery expert here, Mr. Bang.
Yes, I'm CEO Mr. Bang Sung-yong. You talked to me about the price. However, but in industrial perspective, just thinking about the price is not the best way. We are producing LTO batteries and other batteries. I think it's broadly used at the moment. However, rather than buying such amount of kilowatt, we need to think about the raw materials and about recycling issues. Initial cost will be cheaper in an LFP. Manganese, cobalt, nickel is more expensive because they're using steel. But green energy is including titanium, so it means a little more expensive. However, when it's all used, after it's used, let's think about that we are recycling it. LFP will go through the same recycling process, but it doesn't have enough material for recovery. Phosphate, iron, and lithium. In terms of anode, it includes graphite. So some part it will be recycled, but we have to think about how commercial it will be. Then initial price will be cheaper, however, for recycling it's impossible. So social cost will be cost. I think that's the part of thing we have to think about. Recycle and reuse. Industries are not mature yet. So it gives a room for think about it. The energy that we are using is not just about energy density and initial price, but it's more about reliability, lifespan, and performance, and also as well as social cost. So these kind of factors have to be considered for solutions. And you also mentioned about voltage. Battery voltage is related to anode voltage difference from cathode voltage. That's the principle. In terms of phosphate, its voltage is stable, but it's low. But it's low, so when it's packed, the density is low. That means that requires engineering solution. In terms of LTO, it has a high efficiency in charging and discharging that creates less heat. When you pack it, there is a cooling system and heating system excluded. So the energy density is a little bit of different issue. So when it's designed, you have to approach it.
감사합니다. 또 마지막으로 한 분 더 질문 받.
Thank you very much. One last question we may, but I have also some things to answer, so I'll be very short. So you mentioned, actually, CEO Bang has mentioned an important keyword, the economic feasibility and recyclability. So VIB, from the initial stage, our constant strategy is after it is disposed, we can recycle, not reuse a battery. So currently 90% batteries can be recycled. So the reason why battery market is so big was thanks to our green policy. But in what we mean by green policy is that it should be green, no matter when we use it, when we reuse it, or when we dispose it. So that is the main thing that we focused on until today. Economic feasibility, you mentioned. And again, the reason why battery market came so big, we used to only use batteries as a component for laptop or cell phone. But currently, the battery is big enough for an electric service to be made. And by electric service, we want to mention that we have to secure its economic feasibility throughout its lifespan. For that, we have to think about the safety, we have to think about the stability of the batteries. So all in all, LFP is better, whether LFP is better, whether other batteries better, let the market choose it.
Would you please make some final comments on the battery industry and then through the two cases?
Sure, thank you very much. Maybe if I may, I'll just make a comment around the earlier question about hydrogen. Hydrogen does have a role to play. However, it's always important to remember if you can directly electrify, it's always more efficient. If you go from electricity to hydrogen and back to electricity, in the base case scenario, the round trip efficiency of that process is only 36%. That's the best case scenario. When you go from electricity to an ESS, regardless of whether it's VIB or LFP or any other battery chemistry, you get more than 90% round trip efficiency. So if you can store the electricity in a battery, you're better off. The only challenge with all the battery technologies that we're discussing today is that they are very good for hourly storage. If you want to do seasonal storage, so for example, what we use LNG today here in Korea, that's where hydrogen potentially might be interesting. But from again, a round trip efficiency perspective, it's usually if you can go direct electricity, go direct electricity. Don't go hydrogen route. It will be more expensive and less efficient.
And also, would you please say one point to the new startups of the batteries, some advice or some?
I think we already saw very impressive presentations, and I fully agree with our CEO Bang that sometimes I think when we talk about Korea's battery industry, there's this tendency to think about only the three battery makers. In reality, there's amazing startups that we saw today, and as we saw in the earlier presentation from Volta, there's a lot more room for innovation across the battery value chain. So there's still opportunities for more Korean startups to enter the market.
Thank you very much. Last questions from the chairman. Park.
원장님한테 한번 좀, 저 리튬
So, lithium, vanadium, and solid state, you mentioned all these things. So, what we're doing right now. So, what CEO Bang has mentioned, you also mentioned the ESS. So, lithium ESS that CEO Bang is doing, and vanadium ESS that CEO Kim is doing. So, which are your things?
저는
I think rather than competitiveness, I think it's a complementary technology. Energy industry is growing, and one technology is not dominating everything. In Korean industries, when there is a good technology, people think one technology is dominating the whole market. There's a saying, winner takes all, but it's not true. I think ESS divergent solution. VIB has strengths and weaknesses, and Green Energy's LTO has also strengths and weaknesses. But when we see application and use cases, depending on locations and environment, there is an optimized solution, but it's different. And this optimal solution itself can enter into a niche market. But niche market itself can be a huge business potential. So my answer is, rather than competitiveness, it's about working together.
보면은
So, for a customer point of view, for customers, they want more products that's more efficient, that is cheaper, that is more density. So that's what customer seeks. So even in the same company, there might be several technologies, but from a customer point of view, we can see strengths and weaknesses, but customers want something cheaper and better. So what is your thoughts on this? Please comment on this.
Mr. Kim, please go first.
어려운 질문은 저한테 넘기시.
So that was a hard question. I can answer.
해야 된다고 생각합니다.
네, I told you about complement technology. I don't know exactly about VIB, but regarding technology, vanadium has longer lifespan than LTO, but performance is LTO is a little bit stronger. So, instant output application such as factories, frequency controls, and peak control could require LTOs a little better. However, in terms of EVs, it doesn't much care about. Of course, in that case, VIB can be useful for EVs. But when you take a look at energy into price, then we will always choose Chinese products, phosphate. But rather than initial cost, we need to think about the energy use and next generation's social cost. Above all, we need to find optimal application solution.
네.
Yes, I think I need to have an answer. And again, Mr. Bang, vanadium has high output as well, but that's not the important thing here. So vanadium batteries went through the ESS market a lot. So we thought about how diverse the ESS market is. That is what I felt actually. So for every single market inside the ESS market, there are more than 10 categories. Some of them need more output. Some of them need more energy support. And currently we talk about long duration or extended duration. So for each market, the battery characteristic is all different. So one single battery cannot be the best solution for all these type of market. What's important here is that for each ESS market, LTO or our VIBs, you have to have a journey to seek which is better for what. But the endpoint is quite the same. For ESS, there are a lot of markets, but at this time of great energy transition, we need everything, and we should be at our own playground. Let's do some fightings. Yes. Thank you very much. And thank you for staying with us for such a long time. And I truly believe that this forum can serve as a venue, a good venue for everyone here to learn and to actually get someone. I believe more and more startups can actually come from this venue. Again, I want to thank all our three speakers. Thank you very much.